If you can't predict future trends early on because you don't have the tools in place, you can really miss opportunities of a lifetime.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to my channel, My Journey into Data Science. And for this very first episode and very first interview, I wanted to focus on why data science is so important from a historical perspective. So today we have with us Peter LeSar. And Peter, thank you so much for being here. And I wanted to ask, as a very first big picture question, what is your business and how has data played a role in the development of your business?
Hi, Francis. First of all, I'm really excited to be here and to be your first guest is a true honor. And I look forward to following your channel with great intent to also continue my own journey in data science. So that's a great question. My company is called Agility Capital. It's a publicly traded company. I'm the CEO of that company. And we have been around for about 30 years. We were operated under a different brand years ago, but essentially we got started in the hotel and resort real estate business, developing hospitality products around the world and properties around the world. And we had tons of data that was building up because we were a very fast growing company at that time. And we really needed systems to be able to address all the data that was coming in about who our guests were and what they were buying with us and when they were buying with us and when their habits were changing and how our guests in total were changing over time and how our trends were shaping up in our business. And all we had at that time was what is called business intelligence. And I think we're going to get a little bit more into that in a moment, but it wasn't enough. And what I hope to help your viewers understand is why is data science such a game changer compared to that earlier era?
Yes, thank you. That's amazing context as we dive deeper in these questions, especially you being the CEO of a publicly traded company and for such a long period of time. So, Peter, I want to ask, what existed before data science that was no longer enough for your business?
So it's actually a fascinating history. If you really dig deep, as I've done, you will see that in the 1960s, uh, everything was on paper, right? And the world's ability to analyze the limited data sets that they had available was quite limited as well, right? And so most decisions were not driven by data, but were driven by intuition. And as we moved into the 70s with management information systems, and we moved into and that was really 70s and 80s, and we moved into the 90s and early 2000s with business intelligence, the main takeaway is that intuition began to drop as the primary driver of decisions as data filled that gap. Intuition is still critical even today, but data has been trending in terms of its overall relevance, and that's going to continue as long as I can see into the future, right? And so for us, business intelligence was a great tool at that time. It's the way we understood the world, in which we had data capture through lots of different systems like point of sale systems and hotel management systems and marketing systems and so forth and so on, right? But the data was historical in nature. It had no sort of predictive analysis tied to it. And in order to therefore come up with those predictions, you had to have expensive business intelligence officers whose time was very valuable, analyzing mountains and mountains of data and trying to eke out insights from that. And so it was very inefficient compared to data science today, right? And furthermore, without the ability to integrate third-party data, without predictive tools, without really an ability to understand root cause at all, it was very limited. So I'm going to give you an example. if typically we had September as a slow month, right, in X hotel and X market, what held us back is really making a prediction that the coming September would also be slow, just because historically it was slow. So we couldn't integrate third-party data around what was happening in the macro economy and demand in other sectors. We couldn't see, for example, whether airline bookings were way, way up, and we should have been able to incorporate that into our data. We couldn't see what weather forecasts look like and incorporate that into our data, right? We couldn't see whether there were other events that were taking people to other markets and away from our market, or vice versa, right? And so just relying on historical data alone had lots of limitations compared to what we have today with data science.
Absolutely. And that's a fascinating idea of the shift between intuition and data, and sort of how intuition is still very important, but how can data fill in those gaps that intuition can't provide for a business?
Yeah, I can think of so many decisions that we took based on intuition that turned out to be bad decisions, right? And it's only sort of having that historical context can we really see the value of being able to properly have full data sets and to be able to predict based on them efficiently.
For sure. So help me understand, why was the ability to predict future trends critical for your business?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a sort of real life example. And let me start with explaining something about trends. When you have a trend inflecting in its very early stages, right? And you can see that happening before others can see it happening, just because while it's still small in volume, there's a rate of change that's increasing, right? You can capture a trend well before everybody else is and capture the lion's share of that trend, right? Most companies catch on to trends when they're already matured and most of that profit has already been earned by others, okay? It's a huge a driver of income for businesses to depending on where you land on that trend inflection curve in terms of your own development, okay? So, for example, years ago, we could see in our data, going all the way back to the late 1990s, that there was a rate of change going on in the consumption of chicken in some of our markets, okay? And chicken sandwiches were just starting to show up on menus, right? And yet we didn't have, and because we didn't have the predictive tools in place, even though we could see there was a rate of change, we couldn't really see how widespread that rate of change was. We weren't even really able to pay attention to what the rate of change was within our own businesses, because they were disparate and it would have taken too many people to sort of figure out that was actually happening in multiple locations at the same time, right? And so by the time the chicken sandwich wars rolled around in the last 10 years or so, that trend was already largely played out. And if we had seen it decades ago and thought about it and positioned accordingly, because we had predictive tools that could show us what might happen, we would have been able to build a much larger business around chicken sandwiches. That makes sense. And so today, where chicken sandwiches are more present on menus than hamburgers are, where McDonald's has $25 billion of chicken sandwich revenue, even though it's a hamburger company, you can see how massive that miss of ours was, right? So if you can't, going back to your question, if you can't predict future trends early on because you don't have the tools in place, you can really miss opportunities of a lifetime.
It must have been so frustrating for companies to, yes, you might be the CEO of a chicken sandwich company right now instead. It must have been so frustrating to see these trends too late and miss
Yeah,
out on what could have been an amazing opportunity
that's right.
if not because you had no data to know about it.
Yeah,
So,
that's exactly right.
so this also makes me think of personalization and how did the need for personalization drive the need for advanced data insights?
Right. This was also a big challenge with business intelligence, right? Because um, we had tons of data, right, as I've mentioned, and and yet we didn't have enough data, and we didn't have enough people to analyze it. So we could see how many hamburgers or how many chicken sandwiches or how many whatever plates of pasta were being ordered, right? And we could even see down to if we had your credit card information and you were consistently using the same credit card, who the buyers were and how much they were consuming and so forth and so on, right? But we had no visibility on what like your individual buying habits were outside of our businesses, right? So we didn't know whether, for example, you were actually going to some other sandwich place, right? And you were spending on other types of things that we could have served and offered to you that we were sort of missing on, right? Or we couldn't see that your overall spending was changing, or you were actually had moved to a new neighborhood, right? Because you're starting to spend in shops you weren't spending at before, and so forth and so on. And so there's all these third party data sets now that people are able to incorporate to build a full picture of a consumer, right? And none of that existed back then. And so to be able to personalize in a way that really meant something to you was virtually impossible. And then just the human hours it would have taken to do that for every single one of our many thousands of customers, based on even the data we had, would have been impossible to the level today, right? And today it's reached such an extent that Amazon's recommendation engine, which tells you, when you go on Amazon, they're throwing things at you that are based on your buying preferences. And at me, they're throwing things that I love to buy, right? And so you might be getting running shoes, and that means a lot to you. And I might be getting something else that means a lot to me, rather than vice versa, right? And we're not seeing anything we want to buy, right? And so Amazon repeatedly gets about 35% of its revenue from its recommendation engine or its personalization engine, right? And and that has changed its outcomes dramatically when you're talking about 35% of its revenue. And the stronger its recommendation engine compared to its competitors, the faster it's going to grow compared to its competitors. And so data science within all that is actually playing the role between defining winners and losers in business today, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how important personalization is to business outcomes, and how important data science has become. And none of that was really possible with just historical data only and human overlay for analysis.
100%. And Amazon knows me very well, always knows what to advise me to buy. And
Yes,
that just makes me think that the value of knowing insights about your customers, and not just like as a whole, but individually, is undeniably valuable.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. So I would love to tie together these last two questions about trends and personalizations and ask, why is it important for businesses to automate decisions?
Yeah, that's great because it really does bring it all together. So um, I'm going to give you in a moment Starbucks as an example. We're in the food and beverage business to a large extent. So these are the cases that I have that also are sort of known to your viewers, and so therefore should be relevant. But before I talk about Starbucks, let me set the stage for sort of why automated decisions have become so important. When I was a child, there were 3 TV stations, and trends were set by whatever was going on those 3 stations. So everybody on Thursday night, the whole country was watching the same TV shows, right? And talking about those TV shows the next day. And those TV shows were influencing what we wore and how we talked and everything else, right? Trends were massified, right? Speed forward to today, past hundreds of cables, channels, and cable TV, to millions and millions of websites and Instagram accounts and so forth and so on. And now there are millions of micro trends happening all over the world, right? And what is trending for somebody who is of your age and your demographic and your geography will be different than what's trending for me in my age and my demographic and my geography, right? Um, and and furthermore, what might be trending for you might be very different than what's trending for your best friend, even though she's very similar to you in all other ways. Okay, so let me explain that with the Starbucks example. Starbucks years ago noticed through its data that the rate of change of teenage girls coming in after school to Starbucks to do their homework and to spend time with their friends was increasing rapidly. Okay, from very small numbers, but increasing rapidly. And Starbucks adjusted to that and developed all sorts of colorful, sweet drinks that were designed to appeal to teenage girls, and that spurred that demand to move ever faster. And year after year, Starbucks is the number one place that teenage girls like to consume food and beverage apart from their home or their school. Okay, capturing data really matters. But that was still a fairly large trend, right? Now, what happens when Starbucks is in England or in Houston or in Toronto, for example, or Tokyo, right? There are, within teenage girls, different preferences and different trends in each of those places. And so Starbucks needs to be able to see those, right? Let's drill down one more level. Now you have Frances, who has some friends, and Frances is on a health kick and her friends are on a caffeine kick or whatever it is, right? And they have very individual preferences, right? And so there's so many decisions to take in personalization that you need those decisions to be automated to get the right products in front of each person at the right moment of the day, or the right offers, or in terms of how they can use their loyalty points and so forth, right? And so it's become very important for Starbucks to not only be able to catch that sort of global trend about teenage girls, but those local trends around teenage girls, and then drive that all down to what they personally want. And the only way they can capture all that is to have all that data analyzed deeply, and for decisions to be automated so that you are getting what you offers that are going to provoke you to buy. And that's what's going to drive income. And if they do that more effectively than their competitors, they grow faster and they win. And if they don't, they grow slower and they lose, because it's now all relative, right? Whoever is outpacing in the development of these tools is going to win, and whoever is underpacing is going to lose. And it's really sort of driving winners and losers.
Amazing example. I used to go to Starbucks very often after school when I was a freshman in high school. So this really was perfect to tie everything together. And just thank you for coming on this channel, Peter. That was our last question. And so thank you for being here and being the first interview on this, my journey into data science.
My honor, Frances. It's been fantastic, and I look forward to seeing your journey through this channel.
Thank you. And if viewers wanted to kind of catch up on what you've been doing, is there a resource where they could go?
Yeah, so the best place is just to go to our website, agility.capital. There's no .coms, just agility.capital. There they can see everything we do. They can sign up to receive sort of insights and updates and so forth. So that would be the best place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.